Sir, you'll need to go through secondary screening. The TSA agent's tone was casual, but his eyes lingered on the advanced prosthetic leg of the elderly man standing before him. That thing on your leg is setting off all sorts of alarms, he added with a smirk. Frankly, it looks more like something out of a sci-fi movie than a prosthetic. Sergeant John M. Macmillan, Mac to his friends, stood still, jaw tight. At 70 years old, the retired Army veteran had faced worse than snide remarks, but that didn't mean they didn't sting. "It's a service-issued prosthetic," Mac replied sharply, "a result of an IED blast in Afghanistan. There's nothing amusing about it." The agent just shrugged, unaffected. "Whatever you say, pal, secondary screening, end of the line." 8 minutes later, Mac was being subjected to a painfully thorough pat-down in a small, sterile cubicle at the airport security checkpoint. His expression was calm, but beneath the surface, rage simmered. This wasn't the first time he'd been treated like this. He doubted it would be the last. Airports had always felt chaotic to him, so different from the order and discipline he'd known during his 30 years as an explosive ordnance disposal, EOD, specialist in the U.S. Army. But he had adjusted. Mostly, his current mission wasn't disarming a roadside bomb or inspecting a suspicious package. Today, it was getting to his granddaughter's college graduation, a moment of family pride, a moment he wouldn't miss for the world. He had arrived early, prepared for delays. He wore travel-friendly clothes, light slacks, a button-down shirt, and a windbreaker. He carried his military ID and a doctor's note from the VA explaining the nature of his prosthetic, which was state-of-the-art, a marvel of titanium, carbon fiber, and microprocessors. It let him walk almost naturally. Unfortunately, it also set off every metal detector it encountered. As expected, when he passed through the metal detector, it blared. He was waved aside by a young TSA agent named Miller, eager, smug, and clearly enjoying his perceived authority. "All right, sir, step over here," Miller said, already sounding impatient. He eyed Mac's prosthetic leg with thinly veiled amusement. "What's the story with that, huh? Trying to smuggle spare parts onto the plane?" Mac took a slow, calming breath. "It's a prosthetic leg. Medically necessary. I have documentation." He reached for his bag to retrieve the doctor's letter, but Miller waved him off with a smirk. Yeah, everyone's got documentation these days. But that thing..." He pointed at the exposed upper portion of Mac's leg where the advanced prosthetic joined his thigh. "That thing is lighting up alarms like crazy." He chuckled to himself. "Looks more like a Terminator leg than something from the VA. Turning to his colleague at the next checkpoint, he said loudly, "Hey, Jen, come check out RoboCop here." Jen, an older and more professional agent, cast Mac an apologetic glance, then returned to her duties without indulging Miller's jokes. Miller, unfazed, turned back to Mac. "Seriously, though, is that some kind of experimental weapon? You building a Decepticon in your garage?" The cruelty of the joke, the public humiliation, it hit Mac like a punch. That leg represented not just cutting-edge tech, but blood, pain, and years of rehabilitation. It represented sacrifice. Mac's voice dropped into a quiet warning. "It's a prosthetic issued by the Department of Defense," he said. "I lost my leg serving in Afghanistan. It lets me walk. There's nothing suspicious or funny about it." But Miller wasn't backing down. "Afghanistan, huh? Sure, and I'm a secret agent." He straightened up, still grinning. "Look, buddy, rules are rules. That leg of yours needs a full secondary screening, visual inspection, explosive, trace, the works. We're gonna take a real close look at those fancy moving parts. Wouldn't want any malfunctions at 30,000 feet, would we?" He gestured to the private screening cubicle. "Go on in, have a seat. This might take a while. And try not to rust." Mac clenched his jaw, but said nothing. He knew that responding would only give the man more to work with. He stepped into the cubicle, enduring the process with the discipline only a soldier could muster. The second agent conducting the pat-down was respectful and professional, but Miller lingered outside, tossing occasional barbs over his shoulder. "Still, don't think it might transform into a laser cannon?" Mac overheard him whisper to another agent, followed by laughter. Each minute stretched longer. Mac worried he'd miss his flight and his granddaughter's big day. He explained the situation. Again, his voice steady but urgent. "I need to board. My flight to Denver leaves soon. This prosthetic is medically necessary, and I've already been cleared before with the same documentation." Miller didn't care. "We'll be done when we're done," he said. "Passenger safety is our priority, even if that means some folks miss their important trips. The message was clear. You're not the priority here. Your leg makes you suspicious." Finally, after what felt like an hour, the screening concluded. Nothing was found, of course. Mac gathered his belongings, hands trembling slightly. He glanced at his watch. He could still make it if he moved fast. Then came the voice, calm, commanding, with the unmistakable tone of authority that quiets a room. "I'm looking for a TSA agent named Miller. I understand he just screened a passenger with a prosthetic leg, Colonel John McMillan. Where is he?" Every nearby head turned. Agent Miller, who had been smugly standing by the exit of the screening area, froze mid-step. Color drained from his face. He knew that voice. Every TSA agent did. The man striding toward them wore a crisp pilot's uniform. His name tag read, Captain David Thorne, and the air of command around him was unmistakable. Tall, composed, and with the no-nonsense gait of a former military officer, he bypassed the line with a flash of credentials that made the supervisor step aside instantly. Thorne was a well-respected figure among airline staff and passengers alike. A former Air Force pilot, he was now the lead pilot for Flight 217 to Denver, the very flight Mac was trying to catch. Known for his unshakable professionalism and deep respect for military veterans, Thorne had been alerted just moments earlier by a gate agent. That agent had been tipped off by none other than TSA agent Jen, who'd witnessed Miller's disrespect firsthand. Quietly disturbed by her colleague's behavior and impressed by Mac's silent dignity, Jen had done what she could. She passed Mac's name and flight number to the gate team, who wasted no time relaying it to the captain. "Captain." Thorne's eyes locked on Miller. "Agent Miller?" he asked, voice calm but steely. "Yes, sir," Miller stuttered, suddenly unable to maintain the bravado he'd displayed just moments earlier. "I'm Captain Thorne, pilot of Flight 217. I've received a report regarding your treatment of one of my passengers, Colonel John McMillan, a decorated combat veteran who lost his leg serving this country." Miller tried to recover. "Sir, I was just following procedure. The prosthetic was unusual. It set off alarms." Captain Thorne didn't flinch. "Unusual? It's a military-issued prosthetic, Agent Miller. Top-of-the-line technology, developed for soldiers wounded in combat. And instead of verifying his documentation and conducting yourself with professionalism, you mocked him. Publicly humiliated a man who has given more to this country than you or I ever could." Miller opened his mouth but said nothing. There was no defense, Thorne continued, his tone sharpened. "Did your procedure include calling him RoboCop? Did it include jokes about Decepticons and laser cannons?" Gasps rippled through the bystanders. Passengers, other TSA agents, even the janitorial staff were now watching. Jen stood silently. Nearby, her expression grave. "Sir, I didn't mean to offend," Miller mumbled, his confidence completely gone. Captain Thorne's eyes didn't soften. "Your actions say otherwise." He turned to see Mac approaching slowly from the screening area, now buckling his belt, his face wary. But when their eyes met, the captain's tone shifted instantly, from commander to comrade. "Colonel McMillan," Thorne said, stepping forward. "Captain David Thorne, please accept my sincerest apologies for the disgraceful way you were treated by this agent, and by the system that allowed it. It was wrong, unacceptable. Mac, clearly surprised, gave a small nod. Appreciate that. Captain, I was just trying to get to my granddaughter's graduation. And you will, Colonel, the pilot said with conviction. He turned sharply back to Miller. Agent Miller, you will now personally apologize to Colonel Macmillan for your unprofessional and deeply offensive conduct, right now. Miller stood stiffly, face flushed. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Captain Thorne raised an eyebrow. Louder. I'm sorry, Colonel Macmillan, Miller repeated, this time audible, though his tone still lacked sincerity. Thorne looked unimpressed. That's not good enough. He turned to the TSA supervisor, who had appeared near the back of the growing crowd, visibly uneasy. Supervisor, Thorne said clearly, I'm filing a formal complaint against Agent Miller for harassment. Of a disabled veteran, I'd expect a full investigation and disciplinary action. Yes, Captain, the supervisor nodded quickly. Absolutely, it'll be handled. Thorne didn't stop there. I'm also requesting a complete review of this team's sensitivity and disability training. Your staff should be trained to treat passengers with medical devices, and especially our veterans with respect, not suspicion and ridicule. The supervisor looked chastised. Understood. With that, Thorne turned back to Mac. Colonel, your original seat was in economy, correct? Mac nodded. Yeah. My granddaughter booked the ticket. Well, as captain, I have discretion over certain seating assignments, Thorne said with a hint of a smile, and we just happened to have a seat open in first class. I'd be honored if you accepted it, with my compliments and the full respect of our entire flight crew, Mac blinked. For a moment he looked like he might refuse. That's very generous, Captain, but not necessary. It is absolutely necessary, Thorne said gently. Please allow me to personally escort you to the gate and onto the aircraft. Mac looked around, still overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of events. Then he nodded. All right, thank you. The passengers and staff who had witnessed the confrontation began clapping quietly, some discreetly, others with open admiration. A few wiped at their eyes. As Mac walked toward the gate beside the captain, more than one traveler stepped aside to pat his shoulder or nod respectfully. And Miller, he was pulled from his post immediately, pending investigation. As he stood off to the side, watching Mac being led away with honor, his smirk was gone, replaced with something far less comfortable. Shame. As Captain David Thorne walked beside, Colonel John Macmillan through the airport terminal, the bustling sounds of travel seemed to fade into the background. The two men didn't say much. They didn't need to. A silent current of mutual respect passed between them. Soldier to soldier, man to man, every step Mac took toward the gate was a little easier now. Not because his prosthetic had changed, but because someone had seen him, really seen him. Not just as a security risk, not as a suspicious object with wires and titanium, but as a human being, as a veteran, as a grandfather trying to make it to one of life's rare milestones. At the gate, the airline staff greeted them with warm smiles and subtle nods. One of the flight attendants whispered something to the others, and a few moments later, word had clearly spread throughout the crew. Every person Mac passed now looked him in the eye, not out of curiosity or fear, but with gratitude. Captain Thorne guided Mac onto the plane ahead of the other passengers. Let's get you settled, Colonel. He led Mac to 1A, the front row of first class, a wide leather seat, ample legroom, a window with a view, and the kind of silence you don't get in the back of the plane. It wasn't just an upgrade in class, it was an upgrade in dignity. Would you like a drink before takeoff? The flight attendant asked gently. She wasn't just offering a beverage, she was offering comfort. Water's fine, thank you, Mac said, as he sat, easing his prosthetic into a comfortable position. A flight crew member carefully stored his bag, treating it with the care of a soldier's gear, not just another carry-on. Captain Thorne leaned down slightly. Colonel, if there's anything else you need during the flight, Don't hesitate to let me or the crew know. I appreciate that, Mac said quietly. And for everything back there, you didn't have to. I did, Thorne interrupted, because some things are worth standing up for, even when it's not our job. What happened to you was wrong. I've seen too many good men and women disrespected after giving everything they had. There was a pause. You shouldn't have had to endure that, Thorne added. Not here, not anywhere. Mac gave a slow nod, emotion thick in his throat. He'd handled humiliation with composure. He'd handled disrespect with silence, but kindness. That was the thing that almost broke him. Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know. As Thorne stepped back into the cockpit, Mac finally allowed himself to exhale. The anger, the shame, the tension, it started to fade. For the first time that day, he felt peace. The flight boarded as usual. Passengers filed in, unaware at first of the man in seat 1A, but some recognized him from the checkpoint scene. A few approached quietly, saying nothing but offering a hand, a nod, a thank you for your service. One young woman, maybe in her early 20s, paused. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between Mac and the seat next to him. I just wanted to say, she began, my brother lost his leg in Iraq. He's never flown since. He's afraid of going through security, afraid of being treated like that. I wish he'd been here. I think, seeing what happened, how you handled it, it would have given him hope. Mac offered a small, warm smile. Tell him he's stronger than he thinks, and that the world still has people who'll stand by him. She nodded quickly, eyes watering, and moved on to her seat. The plane took off on time. Smooth skies. Somewhere over the Midwest, Mac dozed off for a short while, the hum of the engines almost soothing. He dreamt, not of war, not of pain, but of walking without limping, of hearing his granddaughter's name called across a stage, of being surrounded by family and laughter. When the flight landed in Denver, Mac was the first to deboard. Captain Thorne met him again at the front of the plane. There's a wheelchair service here if you'd like, he offered. Mac chuckled softly. After all that, I think I'll walk. Besides, I've got a graduation to catch. Thorne smiled. Enjoy it. You've more than earned it. As Mac stepped off the jet bridge and into the terminal, he saw her, his granddaughter, standing among the crowd with a homemade sign that read, We Grandpa Mac. She was in her cap and gown, eyes shining. She rushed to him, threw her arms around him tightly, careful of his balance but not holding back on emotion. You made it, she cried. Wouldn't have missed it, Mac replied. Not for anything. Later that evening, at the graduation ceremony, Mac sat surrounded by family. No one else there knew what he had endured that morning. No one saw the prosthetic hidden beneath his trousers. But his granddaughter knew, and when she gave her speech as class valedictorian, she paused midway through. There's one person I want to thank more than anyone, she said. My grandfather, Colonel John McMillan, who taught me that strength doesn't always come from muscles, but from dignity, from rising above, from walking tall even when the world tries to pull you down. Mac's eyes filled with tears. Not from pain, but from pride. Word of the airport incident spread far and fast. Passengers who'd witnessed it shared it on social media. One post read, saw a veteran being humiliated by TSA today, and then saw a pilot stand up for him like, oh boss, humanity isn't lost. It went viral. The TSA issued a formal apology to Mac that same evening. They also announced a nationwide review of staff training, especially on interacting with disabled and veteran passengers. Agent Miller was suspended pending investigation, and a broader internal audit was initiated. Captain Thorne received commendations from both the airline and various veterans organizations. When asked why he stepped in, his answer was simple: because respect isn't optional, especially not for those who've earned it the hard way. If this story restored your faith in humanity, share it. If you believe respect is the Least we owe our veterans, hit that like button, drop a comment to salute our heroes, and subscribe for more powerful stories that matter. To all who serve, we see you, we honor you,